Welcome to the Generous Business Owner Podcast, where business owners gain inspiration and encouragement to live a legacy, not just leave one. And now your hosts, Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's Generous Business Owner Podcast. My name is Jeff Thomas, and we have a very special guest with us today. It's Dr. Phil Goad. Phil is the founder of an environmental consulting business named the Center for Toxicology and Environmental Health, and you'll learn all about that. But thanks for being with us, Phil. Great to have you with us.
Thanks for the invite, Jeff. I'm glad to be here today.
It's going to be fun. So Phil, tell us, I know you're in Arkansas now, but were you always in Arkansas? Where did you grow up? What was your family like? That kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I actually grew up in Denver, Colorado. I was born in Albuquerque, New Mexico, but my mom and dad moved to Denver when I was 2 years old. And so I grew up there and lived there until I headed off and went to college here in Arkansas and then did my graduate work at the Med Center here in Arkansas. So grew up in Denver, Colorado.
Gotcha. But it's kind of, you got the outdoors in common. A lot of people in the outdoors in Colorado and, well, New Mexico too, and Arkansas. So have you always loved the outdoors?
Always. Yeah, it's always been part of our lives. My family didn't have a lot of resources. My dad had a high school education and eventually moved in. He became a state farm agent with a family in Denver that became kind of like my second parents, my second brothers and sisters. They had a business together for 40 years. And we just spent a lot of our time, most of our vacations were in Colorado, camping. And I loved to fish really early on in age, trap fish up in the mountain streams. And so grew up with a real love for the mountains, and that gets in your soul. It kind of stays there and have carried that all the way through. We live in a beautiful place in the Ozark Mountains here in Arkansas too, and still enjoy the outdoors as part of our life.
Very good. And now, did you have any kind of entrepreneurial bent as a kid, or and I know you kind of went into medicine and that sort of thing, but was it kind of more medicine or entrepreneurial? Any entrepreneurial stories as a kid?
Well, when I think back of it, I was pretty entrepreneurial I didn't know that word and never thought like that. But when I think about the things I did, I went door to door and selling seeds when summertime. I would, vegetable seeds, flowers. Then there was a company called Fuller Brush. I don't know if you remember.
Oh yeah, that's famous.
I was actually a Fuller Brush man, believe it or not, when I was in high school, which in Colorado in the wintertime, going door to door is not a lot of fun.
Brutal.
Go around and see if I could convince them to let me show the latest carpet cleaner or stuff like that. I did that for a while. In Colorado, they went through a time where all the houses had backyard incinerators for trash, and then the air quality got so bad that the city outlawed them. So all these neighborhoods had concrete, incinerators in their backyard where you'd burn your trash. And they weren't huge, but they were pretty big. And so all of a sudden, everybody had these useless things in their backyard. So I said, well, I bet I could make some money in that. And went around and I would, with a sledgehammer, break them up into pieces and haul them out in a wheelbarrow. My dad would leave a trailer out there and I'd fill it up. And then I started getting smarter and go, wait a minute, I can actually pick it up with a dolly and just roll it out to the car and not have to break it up anymore. And so I did that. I worked for a veterinarian. I worked for a garden shop guy and just did a whole lot of different things over the years. My dad was a hard worker, and I guess he gave me the desire to go work too.
I love it.
When I would shovel snow in the wintertime and mow yards.
I bet.
So
I love it. And then how did you always know that you want to do something in medicine? How'd that come about?
Well, actually, I didn't know that. When I left when I left Colorado, went to Harding University, which is a Christian college at that time, I was thinking I was probably going to become a preacher. I had felt like I maybe was having the calling to do that. And that lasted for a little while. And then I began to realize I kind of liked the science. and
Yeah.
started majoring in chemistry and began to think real seriously about uh, becoming a chemist and going to graduate school and become a chemist in some way and use that skills. And my senior year of college, a Harding alumnus came and gave a talk. They had graduated from Harding, gone to the medical center in Little Rock, and was in a graduate program in toxicology, which I'd never heard of. And toxicology is the harmful effects of chemicals. So here it married together the idea of chemistry and medicine in one field.
Hmm.
And I instantly knew, I said, that's what I want to do. So there were only two programs in the country at that time where you could get a postgraduate degree in toxicology. One was Arkansas. So that's the only thing I applied for, was to go into the interdisciplinary toxicology program at the medical center, and was accepted and became a toxicologist.
So how many years is that in grad school?
I had 4 years in grad school,
Okay.
4 years to get my bachelor's degree in chemistry, then 4 additional years to get my doctorate in toxicology.
Okay, gotcha. So it's really a doctorate in toxicology. It's not necessarily an MD. Is that correct?
Well, no, it's a PhD.
It is a PhD program. Okay.
At that point, I went to the med school and I took a lot of medical classes with
That's
physicians.
what I kind of thought there was a tie with medicine.
Yes, there is,
Okay.
but I ended up going down the path of getting my doctorate, my
PhD.
PhD in toxicology.
So what does one do other than maybe teach when one gets a PhD in toxicology? Did you go straight into industry? Did you do some teaching? Where did it go from there?
Yeah, no, good question. There's several things. One is teaching. You
Yeah.
could do that. The other is, we've all seen the TV shows about people getting poisoned, and they try to figure out what's in their body. That's kind of forensic toxicology.
Right.
That's one field. Another one,
The inevitable plant down the river
yes,
that's poisoning the river.
that's
What
the third.
happened? Right.
That's the third kind. That's kind of environmental
Oh,
toxicology.
okay.
How do chemicals affect the environment or the workplace? Those were the one, and the government has quite a few toxicologists involved.
No, yeah, it would make sense.
But I eventually moved in. I worked for a pharmaceutical company and worked for an industry testing drug products. And my specialty was birth defects and reproductive problems. I did my dissertation in fetal alcohol syndrome. And so I went to work for a pharmaceutical company, and our FDA regulations require that as you begin testing them more in humans, you have to do animal tests first.
Right.
And for me, I was doing the tests to say, could this drug potentially cause birth defects or reproductive problems? So I was in that field for a while. And then I moved over. Some friends of mine, actually a professor of mine at the Med Center, had started a consulting firm in Little Rock, Arkansas. So I moved back from upstate New York, where I was working for the pharmaceutical company, back to Arkansas, and went to work with a consulting toxicology group. And we started doing I did a lot of litigation, courtroom related work,
Yeah, see
being
that.
experts out, eventually became an expert myself. But during that process, I got a call one day from an attorney in Little Rock, said, there's been a train derailment in Rising, Arkansas, and it's spilled a chemical. Can you come help us? And of course, I said yes, not knowing anything about
Right.
what to do. But we found somebody could go test the air with us there. And so that was the very first thing. That was in 1989. Went to a train derailment, started developing skills of being able to respond when there was a chemical spilled. How do you test the air, the water? Is it safe in the community? How do workers have to protect themselves? That whole field of what happens when a chemical isn't in the place it's supposed to be.
Right.
That affect human health of the environment.
Yeah. Clean it up for people and the environment.
Yeah, we didn't clean it up, but we worked with the people that did.
Yeah, how to do
How
it
clean
safely.
does it have to be? Is it safe to be in this area during an emergency? Does the community need to evacuate? Could the wind blow the chemical over the community, and therefore they need to evacuate? Or when can they go back home? All those kinds of things, the public health parts of the work, and the workers on the site. Our company was involved in helping advise and consult in that area.
Makes sense. So at what point did you feel led to start your own consulting business?
Well, it was after, I went to work for a pharmaceutical company,
Right.
then I went to work with a consulting firm, and we were hired away by another company, environmental consulting company or environmental firm in Denver hired us to start a toxicology group. And we were promised ownership and those kinds of things. And those
Yeah.
things just didn't come about. And
Okay.
then in 1996 or so, we began to talk about, we think we could do this ourselves. And so we left in 1997, left the consulting firm we were with and started Center for Toxicology and Environmental Health, which we later just rebranded as CTEH,
Okay.
is the name of our company.
And did you end up, I mean, how big a business did it end up becoming?
It was a pretty big business. We
Yeah.
had, when we sold it in April of 2020, we had 200 employees, full-time employees, and another 200 what we called rapid responders. They lived all over the United States and
Yeah.
had lifestyles such that they could go through the training and everything needed to, but they could get a call today and be on a plane that evening and go work at a plant explosion site for 3 weeks. And
Got
their
it.
lifestyle allowed them to do that. So it was a variable workforce that we called rapid responders. We started that in 1997.
Wow. So that's a pretty good run. I mean, 23 years of doing that. Did you have partners? What was the ownership structure like?
Yeah. I had there were three of us who started
Okay.
the company, and we brought five employees with us and an additional partner with us. We were all believers. And so from the start, we ran our business with the fact that we were Christians in mind, and that informs how you treat people, how you deal with clients, all the things that I'm sure the listeners of this are all pretty involved in too. So I had when four of us started the company in 1997.
Wow. Uh, so that is a hot topic, and when we talk about generous business owner, that generosity takes many forms, right? Like the way you treat your employees, just like you said, what you do with the money, the way you treat your customers, that kind of thing. What were some of the ways you think that that got embedded or imbued in the company? That luckily you did have aligned partners. That's not always the case, spiritually
Yes.
aligned partners. How
Yeah.
did that kind of maybe? Do you have an example or two how that played out?
Yeah, I do. I think a lot of it had to do with the way we treated our employees.
Yeah.
We treated them with generosity,
Hmm.
and so, if that's clearly was the main motive, but the other motive is in our business, and I think it's probably true for most, but it was very acute in our business. Our assets were the people
Yeah.
who were experienced at what we were doing. Our company had people like no one else in literally the world. Our company did things that no one else did, but it was all our people who had been to hundreds and hundreds of incidents, so we knew what was going to happen. So our assets were there. And so it was wise for us, I think, to treat people generously in a way that they would never want to leave. And so in 2013, we went through a leveraged buyout of our company, and the four of us that owned the company, in essence, sold a portion of that. We
Yeah.
retained a portion, each of us, but we sold it to our other company, to our other employees, in a way that we used the profits going forward to basically pay us a note for the company, and they became owners over the time. They didn't even have to pay anything. They just had to stay with us
Wow.
and work. And even during that process, uh, they would get profit sharing
Yeah.
as we were going, even though they didn't fully own the company yet. And that was amortized over 10 years, where we were supposed to get our payout over that time, but our company did very well. In 5 years, it was paid off, and we had, probably, let's see, there's almost 30 people who owned, not a small amount of our company at that point. And then we also moved where every employee in our company, after 90 days, received some shares. They're
Yeah.
called units in an LLC,
Yeah.
but they
Yeah. Right.
received shares. And so everyone in our company was an owner at some level. And it just generated
Was
real
it technically
owner's mind.
an ESOP, or was it just a different kind of? Did
It's
they
the
call it an
leveraged
ESOP?
buyout, just a leveraged
Leverage
buyout.
buyout. Okay.
Yeah, we had a note that
Wow.
these people signed, and we got paid every year based on a formula that of the profits that the company generated would pay us, the
Yeah.
owners, to do that. And for me at that point, before we did that, I decided to take those units, those depreciated assets, and I donated half of what I owned to a donor advised fund at the National
Yes.
Christian Foundation. So the NCF actually became a note holder, but in
Yeah.
5 years so they would get parts of the profits during those 5 years, but when we sold, then there's the money from that went entirely into our donor
Exactly. Sort of
advised fund.
pre-tax went into it's just like
Yes,
donating appreciated stock of a public company, for
that's
instance,
exactly right.
before it appreciates and goes up in value. So that's a cool structure. And where did this all come from? Tell us a little about your spiritual journey. Where did that sort of come into your play? Was it as a kid or later in life? Where did your sort of faith develop?
Well, I grew up in a Christian family. I had Christian grandparents before me on both sides of my family. And so they were all believers, very involved and active in the church. And that was a big part of their lives. And so for my family, I grew up in a time where we never ever missed a gathering church. We would go Sunday night, Sunday morning, and Wednesday nights, unfailing, unless
Yeah.
one of us was deathly ill. You know,
Right, right.
so for years, I had to go home. I had to go to church during the Wizard of Oz, right about the yellow brick road scene, because we had to go to Sunday school.
No
So
DVR. No DVR. You
I
couldn't record
know.
it.
So I had to get sick and actually get to stay home from church to see what happened after the yellow brick road
Well,
on the Wizard of Oz, because we were going to go. We were not going to miss.
that's classic.
I grew
So
up with a real strong faith.
and I know you've been real involved with orphans and families and kids that maybe have trouble finding a family, if you will. Tell us about where that passion came from. What was the root of that?
Yeah, that came from there's a young couple at our church here in Little Rock, Arkansas. And I'd actually gone to undergraduate work into the med center with her father. Her father became pediatrician. So I'd say to her, I knew you before you were born. But they ultimately adopted two children from Ethiopia. And we saw that happen in our church, where they brought in these two children from a foreign country and adopt them. And then one day, one Sunday morning, they got up and announced, hey, we're trying to raise money to build a little school building in a town in Ethiopia. And they were, I learned later, associated with an organization called Life Song for Orphans. And they were trying to raise money. And that was it. We knew her whole life. And so we said, well, we'll help them. We'll
Right.
give. It wasn't even because of the work. We didn't even hardly understand their work, but we loved them.
Yeah.
So we gave it to them and helped. And that was in the fall of 2011. And just about a month or so later, now a man who's now a dear friend of mine, his name is Andy Lehman. He works with Life Song for Orphans. He's in their development, came to Little Rock and just shared about their ministry. And this is kind of what happened. That was like in late November of 2011. And January 2012, it's like we woke up and we're on an airplane going to Ethiopia going, what has just happened here? I call it the life song black hole. We stuck our toe into that, and that just sucked us into the work that Life Song is doing in Ethiopia and Zambia and probably close to 20 countries around the world, and in the United States through adoption and so forth. And we began to support in a bigger way them, and I was invited on their board, and then they then introduced me to Jed Medifund
Yeah.
at the Christian Alliance for Orphans, and I was invited on their board, which I have been until 2024. I rotated off. They have an 8-year board
Yeah.
rotation. And so I rotated off in 2024. And that just pulled us right into the middle of the orphan care and foster care work around the world.
And what is it that draws you to that? I love that origin story of just kind of following your friends in the church, and it kind of turns into this. But as you've been doing that for quite a while now, what is it that keeps drawing you back to that work?
I think it's seeing and some of it firsthand the plight of children and families in our country and literally around the world. And of course, God, it's important to him. The James 1:27 pure and undefiled religion is to visit the widows and the orphans in their affliction and to keep oneself unspotted from the world. But so it matters a lot to God. But also another component of that is at our church, we went to an informational meeting one evening. This is about 13, 14 years ago, where they were taught one of our local state of Arkansas foster care organizations who recruits foster families was talking about foster care. And my wife and I thought, well, maybe we could go and become respite care families. That's a family who might give a break to a foster family and let
Oh,
them go on a date or keep
right,
them
right,
over
right.
the weekend or stuff like that. And in the middle of that, they talked about this organization called CASA, or Court Appointed Special Advocate, and how that person, a CASA, is an officer of the court and advocates for one child and follows them through their court process when they're in foster care. And I had spent a huge chunk of my career was testifying in court cases in the United States and even different places
Wow, I
around the
never put
world.
that together. Wow, that's
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah. And
So
so I
you're
said,
comfortable in a
I'm
courtroom.
very comfortable in a
Oh,
courtroom
like
in
most
front of a
people aren't.
judge, but I would say now I could do it for something really matters instead of just big companies fighting each other, or whatever, toxic
Wow.
litigation kind of stuff. This is for a child who's been left behind and abused or neglected, and they need someone on their side. So I said I could do that, and I jumped in. I'm still a court-appointed special advocate now. In fact, today I wrote my report that goes to court here next week for these two boys that have been in foster care that I've been with for 5.5 years now.
This is
So,
amazing, Phil, because my wife's been involved in on the board of our local CASA uh,
oh
group here in
wow,
Harris County
that's
in
awesome.
Houston for more decades than we would care to admit. Let's just leave it at that. And one of the things, and we've really never had anybody on the podcast to talk about this. So this is really near and dear to my heart and my wife's heart, especially. And so we've been around that world for decades. And one of the things I've thought about, I wonder your opinion on this, is one of the beauties of this kind of work is to take a kid that's through no fault of their own in a tough situation. Okay, and make sure they're in a safer place where they have a shot. How do you sort of describe that transformation or that opportunity?
Yeah. Well, what happens when a child goes into foster care, when a court determines that they've
Yeah,
been neglected or abused, they then go into formal custody of the state, and the court will develop a plan and a plan for the parents to say, here's these 10 things you've got to do to correct your life so you can get your child back, and then
exactly.
plans to take care of the child if they whatever the needs they have. And so a CASA, a court appointed special advocate, knows that plan, and your job is to make sure that that child that is getting taken care of like the court says they are.
The
You're an
boxes
officer of
get
the court.
ticked. Yes, they went
I
to
I I,
the
ex-
yeah.
I have a court order to get medical records, talk
Yep.
to teachers, whatever. And if your wife's doing it, you know that you
Oh,
can go anywhere, and because you're their advocate and you speak for them. And so it's just been a real fulfilling thing to get to be part of that. And it's changed my view of biological parents too, of getting in struggles and losing their kids. It's given me a completely different perspective on that. And ultimately kind of one of my main thrusts right now in my life right now, post earning for a living,
yeah, yeah.
is in the foster care world in our state. So
So maybe unpack that a little bit. I don't think most people understand that world. It seems, kind of scary maybe to be a foster parent and have these kids in with the issues and that kind of thing. What are some of the things you've learned about that world that maybe people who aren't in that world don't know?
well, here's one thing I've learned, Jeff, is everybody can do something. Now, there's only a small, I think, probably in reality, a small percentage of people who actually have whatever it takes, and it takes something special to me from God to put on the heart to somebody to take struggle into their home on purpose,
Yeah.
into their family,
Right.
into their marriage.
Right.
Child that's been abused or neglected. Probably 80% of the kids, it's neglect. It's
Yeah.
not abuse. They haven't been physically or sexually abused. It's neglect. Their parents haven't taken care of them. They don't have the resources, whatever. So, 80% of these kids, these parents could do something and get their life back on order and get their child back. So, our goal is for them to go back to their family.
Yes.
20% are in a place where their parents just have abused them, or they can't take care of them. Those we want to find an adoptive home for. But everybody can do something. If you know a foster family, you can cook meals for them. You can go through a pretty minor steps of getting a driving record check, a background check, and then you can legally go pick up a foster kid from school and take them to the dentist or whatever.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of needs that they have that anybody can do. If with about that same requirement, you can become a respite foster parent
Okay.
and actually just for a weekend have a child in your home so that foster parent, the couple or they and their family can go get away a little bit and have a little space, and you can help them out with that. So there's all kinds of things that someone can do to help in the foster care. And then there are those who hear the call and they heed that call and they say, I'll take that child in my home. And for this time, I'll be the stability in their life and kind of act like their mom and dad. I'll take care of them in my home while their parents are getting their acts together, hopefully, and they get to go back.
How do you see
And
this playing out, Phil? That's such a great description and encouragement of if somebody's feeling led in this direction, the ways they can get involved. How does this look different? How does orphan care look different? You've traveled the globe and seen this in different situations. Obviously, the U.S. maybe have a little better, well-developed court system. I don't know. How would you contrast what you've seen in orphan care around the globe with what you've seen domestically?
yeah, around the globe, what we've seen, particularly like in Ethiopia and Zambia, and Kenya, it's abject poverty. I
Okay.
mean, just unbelievable poverty and homes with dirt floors, no running water, no electricity, disease, GI diseases from poor water, no, not good water to drink. And so
Right.
poverty is a huge driver in this. And where people, their mom and dads die
Oh,
from
wow.
disease, and grandparents, the grandma or grandpa's taking care of them. And there's not a real formal system of foster care, and in many countries adoption is not really highly regarded. It's not the thing to do. Like, I'm not going to take a kid in and make them my heir, and get in place of my children. So a lot of these kids, when they lose their family, they are really left out. And so
Wow.
there's a lot of great efforts like Lifeline for Orphans that's doing, where we have schools there that feed them twice a day. They hear about God, they get a great quality education and gives them a chance to move ahead. And most of them have some caregiver, a family or whatever that's in
Okay.
there. Some who are true double orphans, no mom or dad, or single orphans where they've lost one of their parents.
So more of a support system is necessary because you don't have as much of an adoption culture and that sort of thing. So more infrastructure, it sounds like.
That's exactly right. You have supplant and provide the needs that are just not there in their community from their parents or their families. There are some movements, for example, we're involved in supporting a group in Ethiopia that's beginning to change their culture and get Ethiopians to come in and begin
Yeah.
adopting children. It's a beautiful thing that's beginning to happen. The pure and undefiled religion, is coming out in these countries where heretofore it was just not acceptable. It was not socially acceptable to adopt. It just
Yeah.
wasn't happening.
Yeah. And it sounds like for you, I know you've done some work with family life and that sort of thing. And it sounds like God's kind of pulled you into the family unit and the importance of the family unit.
Yeah,
Uh, can you talk a little about how that's important to you and maybe a little
sure.
more of the work that you think about comprehensively with families?
Yeah. And part of our work came from a hard story for us in our
Oh,
marriage. And back in it's now back in 2002, I'd confessed to my wife that I'd made some mistakes and been unfaithful to her. And and that began a really hard season for us. Uh, but God really, out of that, helped us become what a good friend of ours, Dennis Rainey, who's the founder of Family Life, told us one day, a couple of years after I'd shared this with my wife, that one day we would become a trophy of grace. Our marriage would be, and we've seen God bring that about to where now marriage ministry is a big part of our life. And we're up here in Mountain View. We have a lodge up in the northern part of the state. And this weekend we had couples in for Art of Marriage weekend. And we've done that now for since 2011, brought in couples, and we've been able to do that in Africa and Zambia and Kenya and bring in missionary couples and just pour into their marriages. And God's brought a lot of people in our lives who've gone through struggles in their marriage like we have. And it's all his grace, just his kindness. It's nothing else. Uh, and so that's really informed those two things coming together. We about probably 10 years ago, in that range, 10 to 15 years ago, we spent some time and kind of got away and said, what does God want for our lives? What are we supposed to do? We came away with four things that we felt was important. Our ministry to marriages, our ministry in the orphan care, foster care world, our work with the body of Christ, our local church, and then the next generation. And those, we have 10 grandchildren, 3 kids, 10 grandchildren, and feel a very not only burden but joy to carry our faith down to the next generation of people. And but then we saw God pull all those together in that we began to see the tremendous strain on marriages and families of people in the foster and adoptive world, those that are going overseas as missionaries and working in this really hard stuff, those here in the United States that bring children into their homes that are from been traumatized and broken marriages that they're trying to deal with. It stresses their marriage very big and interrupts their family. And so we've seen God bring those two together where building into marriages and the foster care adoptive community stuff, it's all kind of fits together in a really neat way.
That is so cool the way that gets knit together. Thank you for sharing that story, even about your own marriage. We were talking before we started recording that, I mean, I think the one of the most powerful things we can do is kind of lead with the limp. We've all made mistakes. It's
Yeah.
just how much we've admitted it or not to ourselves and to others. But and by the grace of God, he can use those things and multiply, kind of use the whatever we've been through that often is negative at that time, how he redeems that and uses it uniquely for positives. One of the pictures I was having, just because I know a lot about the sort of work of child advocates. One thing that I think, I even pointed out the taking a kid from maybe a bad situation, helping them get to a different situation, but it's not always about the kids too. And so I would imagine you have a special sensitivity for the parents
Yes.
also.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that? I mean, we think sometimes taking them out and then getting them to a better one, maybe that leads to adoption. But many times they get reconciled, don't they? Do you have a
Yes.
story of reconciliation or something, a win there or something?
Yeah. I could share what I've learned. When
Yeah,
I
yeah,
got into this, my perception was, and I can tell you it was not right, but I perceived that if a mom or dad has had their child removed for abuse and neglect, they're just not good people.
right. It's
And
unrecoverable. Let's get them out of there.
their kids got to come away. And God showed me, and it's with the two boys I have right now, actually, which I've been their casa for 5.5 years. In the first part of it, their mom and dad were trying to go through the works of doing it, and the dad just kind of got completely out of the picture, and the mom was there, and I was at a meeting. We call it a family team meeting where all the players are together, the state agency folks, the CASA's there, everybody on that team. And I was literally sitting right next to her. And she began to share how she'd been sexually and physically abused as a child. And it's just like God gave me this compassion for her that I had never seen before and felt before. And I realized she was abused and she was neglected, and she just was never given the chance to know how to become a mom. And it just really, that experience really opened my heart. And one of the big parts of the movement we have in the state of Arkansas, it's a movement called Every Child Arkansas, where it's almost 30 organizations now working in foster care and adoption. And for children and families is an organization called Restore Hope. And their initiative is called 100 Families. And they've developed a process and a case management program called Hope Hub, where they bring a community of people around one person and help them move from crisis to career, and help them understand what their biggest needs are through some tests that they do, and then bring the people in to help each one of those, where it's drug, rehab, education, driver's license, legal issues, whatever. A team is for them and helping them. And then when families go into a 100 family setting that have children in foster care, they have shown now with 5 years of data that it doubles the rate of families who get their kids back. And so it is redemption pure and sure that people, if they have someone on their side helping them, that they have a chance to correct the problems they've had and become good mom and dads and get their kids back. And we've got years and years of data showing that it's real, it's true, and it's working. And it's just redemption, which is, as believers, that's what we're about. We've been redeemed, and we're in the business of redemption. And foster care and adoption and caring for the moms and dads, the families, is really a deep part of that, I believe.
I love that. I really love that perspective. I think you're right. I think most of us around that movement are focused on the kids, and in many cases, rightfully so. They're the kind of innocents often in the equation. But that doesn't mean we should ignore the parents and be sensitive to that. I just think that's a very, very important thing. And you were talking about God's definitely a God of redemption. I was just taking notes. I was like, he's also the author of the family, right? So he wants that unit to be healthy and together,
Yes,
you
he
know.
does.
And I was also thinking he's also the king of the second chances.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean,
And
here, okay. I mean,
he does things that are very different. And part of
yeah.
the story in the Bible that has really influenced my view about adoption in particular. And I'll let me mention this person. I'll see if you can guess who it is, or your readers can guess. This person became one of God's greatest leaders
Yeah.
in throughout history. And during the course of his life, early on, he was put up for adoption in a completely godless home, someone who had no regard for Jehovah. God ordained it and put it in a way he would be put up for adoption. You know who I'm talking about, probably, don't you?
Moses.
Moses. And who would have picked Pharaoh in our system today? Who would have looked at Pharaoh's uh, resume and said, "Yeah, let's plant the baby
Right.
in his home," even completely non-believer. But what God did was he provided his sister and his mother and his brother to go along with him while he was being raised. And so when God gave that chance to reveal himself to Moses, they had done the work to prepare him, I believe, to find out who God is and who he was. Because Aaron and Miriam and his mother, God arranged it where they were in his life. And so I thought, well, there's a lot of people who are, wondering about who should be adopting kids and who aren't, and do you have to be a Christian or not to adopt? There's no state in this country where you have to be a believer to be able to adopt a child or to foster a child. So what I decided to say, well, let me be the Aaron, the Miriam, the mother, and the child of a kid who's been taken from their home, and maybe I can do something to influence their lives. So when it's time for them to meet God, they'll be ready. So that's been a big part of.
Hey, Phil, that'll preach, my man. And you got my juices flowing. I'm thinking, I mean, God always uses dysfunctional families, frankly,
Yes,
because they're all dysfunctional.
Yes, there are none that
including
are.
mine. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, there is.
Exactly.
It's just a matter of. So he kind of, we should never give up on
Right.
the family
Yeah.
unit, and he can do amazing things and through these what appears to be dysfunction. Look, I was thinking about Joseph. That's where I thought you were going at first. I was like, brothers throw him in a pit, and he kind of gets, sold,
Yeah.
and anyway, and all that. God works that for good. So anyway, it
Yeah.
just and then redemption comes to that family,
Yes,
Frank.
it did. Yeah. And
So it's
we're
amazing.
redeemed through that family.
We shouldn't give up on any of these kids or any of these parents.
That's
So I
right.
think that's a great word for today.
Yeah.
Well, boy, I could do this forever, but I know we're getting to the end of our time, and it's been a lot of fun just hearing your business story, but then your heart for the family and children, and it's really been a treat. And as we get to the end, Phil, just something we always try to do is there's somebody listening to this on a treadmill somewhere that's behind you on this journey, and they're trying to think about, maybe they got a business going okay, and they're trying to figure out what to get involved in and that sort of thing. And what would just be some practical tip that comes to your mind on how to kind of find the thing that they're supposed to do?
Yeah. I'll be glad to do that. And one of them, the first one, I got two things. I'll
Sure.
do them quickly. One goes back to the beginning of our giving story. That's when my wife and I, after we were married, I was in grad school. We weren't making hardly any money at all. And the reality is we would run out of money before the end of the month.
Right.
My graduate stipend came in monthly, and a week before I would be out of money. And we're
Wow.
trying to work. Now, thankfully, then you could write a check and it would take a while to clear. It had to be mailed instantly. Not
Take a
anymore.
week. Yeah.
It's instant,
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we developed this habit, which to this day I'm still ashamed about. But that is, we would write our check out. We believed in giving.
Yeah.
We'd write our check out to give to church, but then I would hold it, and we would wait to see if we had enough money. And sometimes I tore it up and wrote it out and made it smaller, or sometimes I didn't even give it at all. And then God convicted us, like, I've committed this to him, and now I'm taking away this offering I made to him, and how wrong that he can just convicted us of that. And so we just changed. We said, giving will be first. We'll write that check and I'll put it in, and then we'll figure out how to make do with the other stuff and no longer do that. And when we began to do that, we began to see things turn for us and experience the promises that God gives about if you'll give in faith. And so one thing I would say from our experience is, if you have something that you've decided in your heart to give to God, make that first, and then figure out everything else.
Like that. Make
that's
the
one
gift
thing.
first. It's supposed to go to him anyway. First fruits.
Yeah.
I like that.
The other just a real practical thing we have found through my ownership of my business, and then also I've made some investments in another business. In fact, we're in the middle of one now, a healthcare business in our state that we think is doing well. And we've donated all or part of those shares. They're appreciating assets to our donor advice fund. And I just have found that it's been a wonderful way to give when we put those assets in. Then God has blessed them greatly. They've grown, and it allows us the freedom and the joy of giving over and over again. And it just keeps growing because God blesses this stuff. And so you can keep giving and giving and giving. So using what you own as appreciated assets to give in a setting like an NCF Donor Advice Fund is just a tremendous, and it's a very fun way to give, and it works.
Love it. Two great tips. Give it first, and leverage the tax smart things on appreciated stocks, or use a donor advised fund. Those are two great tips. So, well, Phil, I can't thank you enough for spending some time with us today on the podcast. Thanks so much.
It's been a joy. God bless you, Jeff.
And thank you, everybody, for joining in and listening to this week's Generous Business Owner Podcast. Subscribe, share it with a friend, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Generous Business Owner Podcast with Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt. Make sure to follow the podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can find the guest contact information in the show notes. Stay tuned for the next episode.